And again, if you have a 10-ounce cup, you could drink Rav Revius and still be Yaitse. But l'chatchila, you're supposed to try to have a smaller cup so that you can drink the whole cup, or at least Rav of the cup. That is l'chatchila. When it comes to the last kais, you want to drink the whole thing because of the al hagefen, the bracha achroina. But otherwise, if you're not able to, you don't have to drink the whole cup every single time. As far as the shiurim for matzah, now this also is, let's talk about Kiddush. Another thing that we have this year, it's the second night actually, because it's Matzah Shabbos, is Yak Nahaz. Yak Nahaz is a acronym for the 5 brachas that we're going to say during Kiddush, because it's Friday, it's Matzah Shabbos, and you have to make Havdalah. You have to make Havdalah during Kiddush. So part of Havdalah is the bracha on the Ner. We don't do Besamim on Matzah Yom Tif. There's various reasons for that. And then also the bracha of Havdalah ben Kodesh l'Kodesh. Now, normally during the year, when we make Havdalah Matzah Shabbos, so what type of Ner do we use? We don't use a Ner with just one wick. We use a Ner with more than one wick. And that's based on the Gemara. The Gemara says that, Rava says it should be an avuka, it should be a flame, and or a torch, call it what you want, with several wicks. And the Ran explains it's because of the way the bracha says, Boirei ma'oirei ha'esh, ma'oirei is the lashon plural, many different colors. And when you have a bunch of flames together in a torch, many different colors show. Or it could be just a plural for many different flames. And based on that, we have more than one flame. Now, the problem is that on Yom Tif, there might be some issues with making 2 flames. You have the Yom Tif candles that the wife lit before the Suda, and now you come to make Kiddush. So you think that we should take 2 candles and put them together so that we have a double flame. There's a problem with that according to many Paiskim, because how do you pull them apart? Pulling them apart could be kiboy. And even making a flame smaller is kiboy on Shabbos. And therefore, or Yom Tif. You can't do kiboy on Yom Tif either. And therefore, as far as the double flame for Yom Tif, it's better, the Paiskim say, and there's a big about this in the Hagaras Shulchan Aruch. There's a lot of who talk about this, that say that put 2 individual candles next to each other, but don't put them together to make a single flame. There is on the market the Yak Nahaz candle. I believe that the bookstore in Minneapolis carries them also. They've created a candle, a regular, like the size of a Shabbos candle, that you could put in and light as one of your regular Shabbos candles, but it's got 2 wicks. So it will burn down pretty quickly, but it's a perfect Havdalah candle, and you could buy that and use that as one of the candles. You could light it as a separate candle. It's a shaila if you should light it separate or not, because it could be that's not a tzorich Yom Tif. So light it as one of the Shabbos candles you light anyway, and use that for Havdalah. To make your own homemade Yak Nahaz candle, like taking another wick and sticking it into one of those Neironim, is not necessarily sufficient, because if you look in Shulchan Aruch, I forget which one of the nicer Kalim says that the idea of a Havdalah candle with 2 wicks should be waxed between the 2, coming out from 2 different spots in the candle, not just having 2 wicks coming out from the same spot. That's just basically a wider wick. So that's as far as Yak Nahaz and Matzah Shabbos. I'll talk about the shiurim for the matzah for a moment. Again, they give out these cards. The matzah, it's a very big shear, and again, the technology they had to figure things out when those cards were made wasn't the same that they have today. A very basic guideline. I didn't write this all in the guide. A basic guideline is to figure out how many. You can't really give a measurement for a matzah. I mean, for a machine matzah, it's basically the same. There's 16 matzahs per pound. It's 1/16 of a pound, and they're all uniform. So for the machine matzahs, it's not so different.
That's from Switzerland. Dr. Britannia is from Switzerland.
Okay, one moment. So as far as the shiurim for the matzah, if you're using machine matzah for the seder, and it's interesting, most are makbid dafka not to use the machine matzah for the seder, because they want the hand matzah, which is done by a human being with the lishma, with the kavanas, and they're concerned about the machine not having that. There are those who are makbid to dafka use machine matzah because they're concerned about the fact that when you have human error involved, it's not it's more probable that mistakes can happen. But most use the hand matzah. Those who use machine matzah for the star, it's very easy to figure out. Basically, for maitzi matzah, which is the biggest shear that you want, maitzi matzah, you're going to want to have 3/4 of a matzah, and that would be sufficient for maitzi matzah. For kairech, you don't need that much. For kairech, you have a much smaller shear. It's only 1 kazayis out of 2. I'm not going to have time to go into the explanation of the 1 and 2 kazaysim, but at the end of the day, for maitzi matzah, 3/4. For kairech, half of a machine matzah is already sufficient. And then afikaiman, there's different shitas. Some hold it should be the same shear as maitzi matzah, and that would be 3/4. Some hold a little bit less. If it's a little bit less, 3/10 of a hand matzah is enough, and that's fine. As far as the round matzahs, so the round matzahs, you can't really give a measurement because the matzahs come out, since they're made by hand, they come out different thicknesses. They come out thick matzahs, thin matzahs, medium matzahs, and in general, over time, if you count up the matzahs in a pound of matzah, you're going to have pretty much between 6 matzahs and 9 matzahs in a pound. So what you have to do is count when you get your matzahs. Usually they're in 2 or 3 pound boxes. You count how many matzahs in the box, and you'll know how many matzahs per pound. And if you have the 9 matzahs per pound, that means they're very thin matzahs. If you have the 6 matzahs per pound, that means that they're very thick matzahs. And then you could figure out, if you have very thin matzahs, then a half of a round matzah is enough. You have 9 matzahs per pound, half of a round matzah is enough. Of a round matzah is enough for mighty matzah, for the biggest shear that's necessary. If you have the medium-sized matzah, which is about, let's say, 7 or 7.5 matzahs per pound, so then 2/5 of a round matzah would be sufficient for mighty matzah. If you have the 6 matzahs per pound, it's very thick. All you need is 1/3 of a matzah, and that's enough. And it's important to realize that because some people have problems eating so much matzah. We're eating 2 kazaysim for mighty matzah, another kazayis for koyrach, another 2 kazaysim for afikaimen. According to some of the Rishonim, the Rashbam, the Rashi that the Mishabur brings down, the ikar chiyuv that we're yotzei is with the afikaimen. So you don't want to lose your appetite before the afikaimen for matzah. Some are makbid. It's a very difficult thing to do because of those shitas, to not talk from the time they make the bracha al achilas matzah throughout mitzvah matzah, mora koyrach shulchan aruch and tilt sofan, because they want the bracha to go without a hefsek on the afikaimen. That's a difficult thing to do. At least you should try not to talk between the bracha and the end of koyrach. So at least it's going on the mitzvah matzah and the matzah of the koyrach. But be that as it may, if you want to go into the next year of koyrach, if you have a thin matzah, 1/3 of a matzah is enough. If you have a medium-sized matzah, 7.5 per pound, 1/4 of a matzah is enough. And if you have the really thick matzahs, 1/5 of a matzah of the round matzahs is enough for koyrach. There are other things to talk about. I don't know if we're running out of time. I want to say a little bit of machshava on.
You want to ask him, give him a chance?
Okay, so the question of shal shudas. Let's address that question. It's a very good question. This is a halacha which applies not just.
Dr. Biktan asked a question. Could you talk about the proper time of Shalosh Shudas, as Pesach is Shabbos, and we are not allowed to eat after Yom Tov,
in the afternoon.
Afternoon out of Yom Tov.
Right. So that's a very good question, which applies to any time you have a Shabbos day, which is Erev Yom Tov, whether it's the first day of Yom Tov or it's Erev Yom Tov. So to eat Shalosh Shudas in the afternoon, like you usually do, is not allowed because you can't have a Seudah late in the day. It's lechatchila. You should really start the Suda before Chatzais, but after the Shah Asiris, the beginning of the Shah Asiris, the 10th hour of the day. It depends where you live. You have to figure out the Shah Zmaniyos, the proportional hours. But 3/4 of the time between the Netzach Hama and Shkia is when the beginning of the 10th hour is, and that's usually about 4:30 or so, approximately in many of the places. And once that hour hits, you're not going to start Shalosh Shudas, which is usually the time that we eat Shalosh Shudas. So the generally accepted mahalach is to split the morning Suda into 2. You wash and you have part of the Suda, and then you bench. You have to take a little bit of a hefsek, maybe walk around the block 15 minutes, and then come back and wash a second time. Now, it's important to realize that the main Suda of Shabbos is supposed to be the second Suda, the first Suda of the day. So some people who wash and have the salad and then bench and then have the cholent and the liver and everything else for the second part of the Suda, that really isn't the right way to do it, l'chatchila, because that's shal shudas, the second Suda, and the main Suda, so the cholent or the liver should be in the first Suda. And maybe wash and have dessert or a little bit of food by the second Suda, and that will be for shal shudas. There are some poskim who have said that you could be yotze shal shudas on with pei rice, with fruit, and if a person gets stuck, that would be the way to go. But l'chatchila, you're supposed to wash. It even says that the person, I think they say b'shem the Beis Halevi, Reb Chaim Brisker, that by learning and being mechadash chidushay Torah, that could be a kiyum of shal shudas. The problem with that is if later on you slug up the chiddush, then you lost your shal shudas. You can't really slug up eating a fruit. So it's best to eat something, if not washing, than to eat a fruit for shal shudas.
Okay. Does anybody? Rabbi Greenberg wants to say ashkafa on Yom Tov. Anybody wants to ask any questions before he says a Jerush about Hilchos about Pesach? Anybody Pesach, Akiva, any Professor Kaplan? You have your chance now before we get to a thought on Pesach. Anybody? Yaakov? No questions? What happens? Today no more questions? This is the time.
He's leaving already.
No, he's saying. I'm just saying thank you. No more question. Moshe, no question. Shoyel and V'Darishim v'Hilchos Pesach. Anyway, I'll tell you one last word, and then Rabbi Greenberg will say his drush. Rabbi Greenberg mentioned about, he started this year about the Ramah says the Noyagin about the minig of giving Mois Chitin. And the Mishnah Berurah Taka brings that from the Yerushalmi they ask, why does he say it's a minig? L'chayr, it's a clear Yerushalmi, it should be a chiyuv. It's not a minig. So one of the Mefarshim explained that it's a funny custom that for Pesach you find that the Menei Yisrael are more machmir and a minig than a din. So that's why he writes Noyagim. Somehow it became a minhag Chag Pesach. So if there's no more questions, Rabbi Greenberg will finish with a hashkafa on Pesach.
Okay, if I'm going too long, you can let me know. I really want to go back to what I started with. We talked about the chumrah de pischa and the fact that as much as it's difficult today to clean for every crumb for some housewives, and they have to focus on what's halacha and leave by what's minig and what's spring cleaning. I don't want to belittle the fact that cleaning for every single crumb of Pesach has been a time-honored minig by Klal Yisrael for the longest time, and there's reasons for that in this Forum HaKadoshim. I want to talk a little bit about that and touch on that and some other things also. The highlight of the Seder is Magid. Magid is we tell over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And the opening paragraph of Magid is the paragraph of Holach Ma'anya. It talks about the matzah that we ate when we left Mitzrayim, the poor man's bread, it calls it, the lechem oini that we ate when we left Mitzrayim. Now, there's something strikingly different about this paragraph than the rest of the Haggadah. The rest of the Haggadah is written in Lashon Kodesh, in Hebrew. And this paragraph of Holach Ma'ani is written in Aramaic. Why is this paragraph different than the rest of the Haggadah? So, obviously there's much ink spilled on this question, but a basic reason that's given is because this paragraph wasn't included in the original Haggadah. The Haggadah is from the Tanoim, times of the Mishnah. The Mishnah was written in Lashon Kodesh. That was the language that Klal Yisrael spoke. The paragraph of Halach Ma'anya was added later. The paragraph of Halach Ma'anya was added to the Haggadah at a time when Klal Yisrael was speaking Aramaic, when they were already in Golus Bavel, in the exile of Bavel. And it was an addition to the Haggadah that was very relevant to the times that they were living in, because it was a very harsh life in Golus, in exile, and the Yidden of the Golus Bavel were wondering to themselves, what is this idea of celebrating Pesach? We're gonna celebrate a redemption that took us out of bondage, out of slavery, when right now we're back in slavery again? This is really a question we can wonder about today also. We're back in Golus, this long and bitter Golus of Edom, and we're under the yoke of the foreign nations. What is the idea of celebrating Pesach even today? So this is the question that the Haggadah is addressing. Before we even start talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim, we say, Holach Ma'anya, this poor man's bread on the table symbolizes the poor condition that the Yidden are in today. The matzah, the situation of Golus, of exile. But nevertheless, we express that we have reason to celebrate today. Why? Because Hashata Hacha, this year we're here. But Lashana Haba, Ba'ara di Yisrael, and Hashata Avdi, Lashana Haba b'nei Chayrin. Rabbi, well, where's the mouse? Sorry. Lashana Haba b'nei Chayrin. That we proclaim our certainty. Okay, thank you. We proclaim the certainty that we know that sometime in the future we're going to be redeemed. And on what do we base that certainty? We base it on the Yetzias Mitzrayim. We know that Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labanim. And if Yetzias Mitzrayim took place from the original Golus Mitzrayim, we know that every other Golus, as has been in the past of the next three, we had a Geula, a redemption, and we are certain that this is going to take place, Emir Hashem, from Herav Yameinu, Amen, in the near future. So this paragraph was added in Aramaic. It's our ray of hope that we cling to, and we look forward to our Geula. Now, there's another place in the Haggadah that the author of the Haggadah really refers to this concept also. There's a story, very well-known story of Ma'aseh, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. There was 5 Gedolei Olam, 5 of the Gedolei Hador. They were Shayim Sum b'Bnei Brak. They were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they were Masap Mitzias Mitzrayim. So there's a question that is asked: why the Baal Haggadah? Why did he feel necessary to tell us where they were sitting? There's a very nice story that they were talking about Mitzias Mitzrayim the whole night, and we learned from that tremendous things. Who cares where they were? Bnei Brak is important. there must be a lesson that the Baal Haggadah is teaching us that they were sitting in Bnei Brak. So the Chasam Sofer says that the Tanoim, these Tanoim lived through the Churban. We know that Rabbi Akiva and Chaveir were at the time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. And now they were in Bnei Brak, not in Yerushalayim, because the Churban had taken place, there was no Beis HaMikdash anymore. And the Baal Haggadah is teaching us that despite the fact that they were in Golus, they were still sitting down to the Seder to talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim. And it's bringing out this point again, that we learn from here that even in Golus, we have to celebrate Yetzias Mitzrayim. But I want to tell you a beautiful idea that I heard. There's a similar part in the Haggadah of the Aruch HaShulchan to explain why Bnei Brak is so important to point out. We're all familiar with the Gemara at the end of Makkos that tells us that Rabbi Akiva and a number of his friends, some of the same ones he was sitting with, it says Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Shua, they were traveling up to Yerushalayim and they came to the Mokum HaMikdash and Harabayas, and they saw a fox, a shul, that was walking out of the Mokum HaKodesh HaKadoshim. And they all started crying, but Rabbi Akiva laughed. And they turned to Rabbi Akiva and said, "Why are you laughing?" So he turned to them and said, "Why are you crying?" So they said, "How can we not cry? We see the place that even a human being couldn't go without dying, and now a fox walks out and he's unharmed." That shows what a desolate state HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Shekhinah is in. So Rabbi Akiva said, "That's precisely why I'm laughing. Because I know, and you know, that there's two psukim. There's a pasuk that equates the nevuah of Uriah and the nevuah of Zechariah. Although Uriah and Zechariah didn't live at the same time. But the Torah is making one dependent on the other. That until we see a complete kiyum, fulfillment of the nevuah, that the Beis HaMikdash will be destroyed and desolate, we can't be assured that there's going to be a kiyum of the next nevuah, that it will be rebuilt. But now that I see that there's a fulfillment of that first nevuah, I'm assured that it's going to take place, the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, and that's why I laugh." And we all know the Gemara says that Akiva nichamtanu, you consoled us, you've consoled us. And the question is very simple. All these chachamim were gedolei olam. How come they couldn't see what Rabbi Akiva saw? He's the one who had this vision to see in Churban what was going to take place in the future. The other ones were crying. Why didn't they also see what Rabbi Akiva saw? And you know what the answer is? The answer is that Rabbi Akiva was a ben Gerim. Rabbi Akiva descended from someone, it says he was b'nei banav shel Sisra.
This is Rabbi Shachar, the Al-Bezin of Toronto.
That's your shver, what?
It's my Shver's brother. Oh. 1 second, Rabbi say. That's funny, huh? Rabbi, this is the funniest thing. Rav Shachar, I will call you back in 10 minutes, okay? Isn't that funny? That's the funniest thing. Yeah. I'm sorry about that.
So Rabbi Akiva was a ben Gerim. He was b'nei banav shel Sisra. And what is the concept of a ger? A ger is someone who he's in his own nation, but he sees the emunah, the faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu so clearly that he's willing to turn his back on everything that he has, his family, his friends, his social circle. He'll have problems mixing into a new community, a new nation. He might have problems marrying off his children, the first generation. But he knows that the prize down the line is well worth it. He sees the future. He's able to take himself out of the difficulties of the now and look into the future and see how things are going to be better and going to be good. And then, once things get better, he'll be part of the Am HaNivchar, part of the chosen nation, and therefore he's willing to go through those hardships because he can see the future goodness even in the tough times now. That's what Rabbi Akiva inherited from his ancestors. Rabbi Akiva was the Ben Gerim. He inherited that ability, that midah, that concept of being able to pull yourselves out of the difficulty of now and see the good in the future. So that's why the Baal Haggadah tells us they were in Bnei Brak. The Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us Rabbi Akiva was the Rav in Bnei Brak. That was his town. This was right after the Churban. They were living after the Churban, and they sit down to Pesach night and say, how can we celebrate and talk about the great things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us by Yetzias Mitzrayim? We're right back in Golus now. The Beis HaMikdash is gone. This is the time to celebrate. So they had difficulty with that. So they went to Rabbi Akiva and they spent the Seder by him. Rabbi Akiva is the one who was able to be menachem them again and tell them and say, this is just the now, this is the here, this is the difficulty now. Mir Hashem, in the future, we're going to have a Geula Shlema, and he was the one who could give them that chizuk. That's a beautiful idea in that Maisa to bring out this point of the whole concept of the Seder, of the Matzah, the Holach Ma'anya, is bringing us the chizuk for the future, and that's why we celebrate Pesach right now. But let's go back to Holach Ma'anya, right? It's not just the paragraph of Holach Ma'anya. Perhaps it's even the message of the Matzah itself. The Matzah that we talk about in the Holach Ma'anya, Lechem Oini, that makes the same point. You know, there's a well-known mashal that explains why we're able to celebrate in Golus about the Yetzias Mitzrayim. There's a fellow who became very, very wealthy overnight. He had been very poor all his life, and he became very wealthy, and he hired a Rebbe to teach himself Torah. And for many years he was rich, and every single year on the anniversary of his rise to wealth, he made a big party to celebrate his wealthy status. One day his fortunes turned and he lost everything. And the next year on the anniversary of his rise to wealth, he still made the party. And somebody asked him, "What's going on? You no longer have that money." So he says, "Yes, it's true. I don't have the money anymore that I gained on that day. But the fact that that money allowed me to hire a Rebbe and to teach me Torah, the Torah that I learned over all those years, that Torah is still with me and is mine forever. And therefore I can still celebrate the day that I became rich to enable me to learn all that Torah." That's the mashal. And it's the same way with Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim fell to the lowest levels of Tumah possible. And Yetzias Mitzrayim gave them the ability to pull themselves out of those levels of Tumah and become the Am Kadosh that we became, until they reached the highest level, the epitome of standing before Har Sinai and accepting the Torah. That Kabbalah Satar was a product of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And the fact that we lost that freedom, and we're now in Golus, but we still have the Torah. Kabbalah Satar is still with us and is ours forever. And therefore, we have a reason to celebrate today. And now getting back to the Chametz, we have to realize, in the Sforim HaKadoshim it tells us, that the struggle that we went through at that time, from leaving Mitzrayim until Matan Torah, to throw off the levels of Tumah and rise through the levels of Kedusha, it's symbolized by the matzah and by the chametz. The Zohar frequently uses the chametz and the matzah as symbols of the struggle between Ra and Toiv, between goodness and badness in every person. The Zohar calls the matzah the michlo da asvata, the michlo da asvasa. It's the spiritual food, the food of spiritual health, is what the Zohar says. And the chametz is symbolic of the Yetzer Hara. The ways of the Yetzer Hara are really similar to chametz. The process of fermentation, the process of chimutz, it's a process of disintegration and decay. The Yetzer Hara tries to decay us and to bring us down, and it's exactly what the yeast does to the dough to make it chametz. If you look in the Gemara in Brachas, Daf Yud Zayin, some of the Sidurim bring it. There are different tefillos that different Amayram would daven on a daily basis, along with the Shemona Esrei. That's right. B'tzayneinu lasis v'tzaynecha, what Amayra says. But the Umima Akiv Sa'or Shaba'isa. Who's stopping us from doing what you want, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's that Sa'or, that sour dough, and the chimutz in the dough. And Rashi there says Sa'or Shaba'isa means Yetzer Hara Shel B'Vaveinu. That's what Rashi translates. The sour dough is a reference to the Yetzer Hara in our hearts. Hamach Mitzeinu, says Rashi, that makes us chametz. So the Yetzer Hara, which incites us, it agitates us, just as the yeast does to the dough, and he wants us to do Averis. The matzah, though, is unleavened. The matzah represents the opposite concept. It's symbolic of our acceptance of Ol Malchus Shamayim. The fact that we eat matzah every year to commemorate not only our freedom from the physical bondage, we're commemorating the freedom and the removal of chet from our midst, the freedom from our enslavement to our whims and desires, which was the spiritual bondage that we had in Mitzrayim. That is a beautiful idea in the Zohar. The Zohar says, he asks a question, and it seems to be an obvious question. If that's the idea of chametz and matzah, so why is chametz only forbidden 8 days a year? If chametz represents such terrible things, we should be usher to eat chametz the whole year. We should not allow to eat chametz throughout the year. And maybe Pesach